Okay, we're going to go over cellular respiration. You can follow up on this information by reading Chapter 7 in either the Owl book or the Penguin book. So cellular respiration is the process that your cells use on a regular basis to break down all the foods that you eat and turn it into ATP. So you're bringing in the food, and through chemical processes within your body and your cells, we're going to convert it to the chemical energy that your cells actually need. And we're trying to get that molecule ATP so that all your cells have the energy they need to do the jobs that they're supposed to do. So if we go back to the digestive system, this is why we learned it. We bring in our food intake through the digestive system so that we can begin to break down those molecules to smaller and smaller parts and eventually get them to absorb across the membrane in the small intestine so that they can be picked up by the blood and then carried around to your cells. Now the question is, what are we trying to get into the cells so they can convert it into energy? Well, the answer is glucose, C6H12O6. We're trying to get that molecule inside so that we can create ATP from it. So how do we get it inside? Through facilitated diffusion. Remember, the plasma membrane is semi-permeable and it will only allow certain things through it. And glucose is not one of the things that can just bounce on through. It actually needs help. And so it has to combine with insulin so that it has the right shape so it can fit through the transport protein and get across the membrane into your cell. So once it does that, it is now resting inside the cytoplasm of the cell where we can actually break it apart. And that's the first process of getting any cellular energy going through any metabolic pathway. We have to go through glycolysis first. And just look at the word glyc for glucose. Lysis means to break down. We're breaking down glucose. And we actually break it down equally into two halves. Both those halves are what we call a pyruvic acid. So one glucose molecule goes into the cytoplasm and is broken down into two pyruvic acids. We get a couple of ATP here, but for us larger eukaryotic cells, that's not going to meet our needs. Glycolysis doesn't need oxygen to happen. It occurs naturally within the cytoplasm of the cell, and it's an old established way of getting some cellular energy. But like I said, if we are a larger cell, 2 ATP is not gonna do it for us. We need more than that. If we're a little prokaryote, hey, that's fine. You know, glycolysis is good. We got 2 AP. I mean, we're not really big. We're not really fancy. We really don't need it. And that's kind of like the origin story for glycolysis, because remember, we started off as prokaryotic cells to begin with, and they don't have membrane-bound organelles, but they still had metabolic needs, and they still need to be able to get sugar inside, and they still need to be able to break it down. So they use glucose. The reason that glycolysis is doesn't use oxygen is because, well, think back to the early Earth. There wasn't any oxygen available. So there's really no worries or no need to have a metabolic pathway that required oxygen until much, much later when we became, some prokaryotic cells started becoming photosynthetic. We started evolving into eukaryotic cells, and we started having that free oxygen around. We also had to go through a couple of changes that included endosymbiosis, where we can actually have a mitochondria now available to do the work that we need to get that extra ATP in our cells. Fermentation is a continuation of that glycolytic pathway where we are going to get energy without oxygen, and that's what anaerobic means. Ana means without, aerobic means air, so we're doing these types of metabolic pathways without oxygen. It's not as efficient as using oxygen to get energy, but it can meet basic needs, especially if you're a single-celled organism, whether you're a single-celled eukaryotic organism or a bacteria. It works fine. You're small, you don't need a lot of ATP. One form of fermentation is lactic acid fermentation, and a lot of microorganisms use this. In fact, we rely on those organisms for a lot of the food products that we eat, especially in the dairy industry. But I bet you didn't know or consider that your muscle cells will use lactic acid fermentation if they have to. If you ever had been sore after a workout or exercising, then you experience lactic acid fermentation. What happens is you are working out so hard that you're not getting enough oxygen to your muscles, and your muscles get tired. And instead of just giving up and say, we're done, they're like, okay, I can't do the regular way. I got to do another way that I can get you energy without oxygen. We're going to switch gears and we're going to go to lactic acid fermentation. We're going to make you pay for it, for making us do this, but we're going to switch gears. And the way they make you pay for switching gears is that the waste product that they are creating in your cells is lactic acid. So there's literally acid in your cells, and that's why it burns and that's why it hurts. It's because you stressed your muscles out to the point where there wasn't enough oxygen for them to perform their normal function. And it's fine, your cells recover. That's why they always say to stretch and drink lots of water after a workout, is so that you can kind of flush that stuff out of your system. But that's what's happening when in your body, your very own body, when you work out, do a really good workout, and you're depriving your muscles of oxygen. They'll get you the energy, but they're going to make you pay with it with lactic acid. Another form of fermentation is alcoholic fermentation. So where lactic acid is the waste product for lactic acid fermentation, ethyl alcohol is the waste product for alcoholic fermentation. There's microorganisms called yeast. They are eukaryotic, they're a fungus, and they're used widely in the food industry to make all sorts of things for us. You got dairy products like yogurts and cheeses. You use them for beer and wine, and believe it or not, they're used for bread. So it's all a process of allowing those yeast to kind of just live their little short life to our benefit, and as a product of their fermentation, we can get alcohol-derived food from that. There's actually alcohol in bread. It just burns off in the oven. That's why we don't worry about it in bread. So here we want to go into our status quo, the things that your cells are doing under normal conditions, and that's aerobic respiration. We are now using oxygen within our cells so that we can get all the ATP we need. So aerobic respiration, along with glycolysis, will get us cellular respiration. So there's 3 parts in whole to cellular respiration. Just remember that the Krebs cycle and the electron transport chain, which we're going to look at, require oxygen to happen. So this is going to take place in the mitochondria. We have that specialized organelle now available. It's going to basically serve like an engine, and I always like to make that comparison that mitochondria is like an engine. Both require a fuel source. For a vehicle, you're putting in gasoline. For your cell, in mitochondria, you're putting in glucose. Both things, the car and the mitochondria, require oxygen to perform efficiently. And believe it or not, we get the same waste products out of both instances, where we get carbon dioxide and water vapor. So here we are. To make cellular respiration happen, we still have to go through glycolysis. You still got to eat. We still got to break down your food through digestion. We still got to get glucose across the plasma membrane using facilitated diffusion. And once in the cytoplasm, we're going to break it down to 2 pyruvic acids. Once we have that 2 pyruvic acids, it has to kind of undergo a metamorphosis. It has to be groomed into acetyl coenzyme A before I can put it into the mitochondria and have it do work. So I always think of this as like a makeover for a pyruvic acid. It's like getting ready, getting dressed up so that I can go do my job. So that's what I kind of visualize in my head, is that we're just getting like a makeover so that we can do the thing that we want to do. So once it's been groomed, the acetyl coenzyme A will enter into the mitochondria, and then in a rather complex process that we're really not going to get into, it's going to give us the products that we need to continue through cellular respiration. So what I'm getting out of this is carbon dioxide, hydrogen ions, and a couple molecules of ATP. Not enough, but it's giving me the products I want so I can keep pushing things forward. The next phase after this Krebs cycle, so look at that again, acetyl coenzyme A, all gussed up, ready to go, is going to go to the mitochondria. It's going to give me ATP, it's going to give me hydrogen ions, and it's going to give me carbon dioxide. There's that waste product. That's why we're breathing it out. From there, I'm going to use those hydrogen ions to my advantage, just like we did in photosynthesis. Remember, there's the electron transport chain. So within the mitochondria, there's some membranes. Those hydrogen ions are going to be carried there, just like they were in photosynthesis, and they're going to move along the electron transport chain, ultimately generating a vast amount of ATP that our cells need. But we haven't talked about why are we breathing? Why am I taking in oxygen? Well, oxygen is going to come in to the mitochondria, it's going to sweep through, it's going to grab those hydrogen ions, and it's going to form water. And then we're going to breathe that out as water vapor along with the carbon dioxide we generated in the Krebs cycle. So that takes care of all the molecules that we're familiar with in cellular respiration and photosynthesis. But here's the thing, I keep talking about, well, ATP molecules and how much molecules. In the end, when we take one molecule of glucose, we're going to get 36 ATP molecules, which is a lot, which is nice because, believe it or not, that's a lot of energy per molecule. And when you eat sugar, there's lots of molecules coming in, so we're getting the energy that our cells need. So here is cellular respiration. You got your glucose, C6H12O6. We're breathing in our oxygen. All of that's being broken down and placed properly within the cell through the cytoplasm to the mitochondria. And we're creating carbon dioxide as a waste product. We're creating water vapor as a waste product, but we're getting the ATP we need for our cells to do their job. So here's a look at it again. There is a relationship between cellular respiration and photosynthesis. These two formulas are just opposite of each other. They are interdependent, which means we depend upon plants, plants depend upon us. They have to function together to make this whole system work. So when plants are breathing in carbon dioxide and they're taking in water, they're using our waste products. When they give out glucose and oxygen, we're using their waste product of oxygen and consuming their product of glucose. So it's a marriage between the two formulas. They're just inverse of each other, and they're interdependent upon one another to exist. So you can't have one without the other. So there's a balance there. So that wraps up cellular respiration, and again, review chapter 7 in either textbook.